Snow hammered the metal roof of the shelter like a warning drum, each strike sharper than the last, each gust of wind pushing against the battered walls until it felt as if the whole building might lift clean off its foundation. Talon Nez sat on the concrete floor, with his back against a vending machine that no longer worked, knees drawn up, breath clouding in the freezing air. Ashki pressed close to his thigh, the German shepherd's muscles rigid beneath his coat ears, pinned forward toward the door, as though something outside had already chosen them. The shelter light flickered once, then again, then died. Darkness swallowed the room. Talon's pulse kicked hard. He could navigate a blackout. He'd done it in places far worse than a deserted rest stop off Highway 87. But the wind outside was too strong, too charged. A storm building faster than forecasted. He felt the shift in the air, the way he once felt ambushes from the spine outward. Ashki rose first. No hesitation, no sound. Just a single stiff step forward and a low, tight growl that rumbled like a drumbeat against Talon's ribs. "What is it?" Talon whispered, even though he already knew the dog wasn't reacting to the dark. It was something deeper, something moving under the storm's howl. A metallic slam echoed from outside. Something hit the door so hard it rattled in its frame. Talon pushed himself to his feet, boots scraping against cold concrete. Ashki positioned himself in front of him, body coiled, tail, lowered growl, now a whisper of warning. The door handle jolted, once, twice, then stopped. Talon held his breath. The wind roared, snow hissed along the cement outside. A silhouette passed the thin sliver of light at the bottom of the door. Heavy steps, shaky but determined, crunched through the snow. Then came a hard knock. Not frantic, not random. Purposeful. Talon Nez. A voice called, muffled but firm. Talon blinked. No one had said his name aloud in months, not like that, not with intention. Ashki's growling cut off. The dog didn't relax. He simply went silent, ears fixed forward. The knocking continued. "I'm from the county office. I need to speak with you. It's important." When Talon pulled the door open, snow burst inward in a blinding rush. The woman standing outside braced against the wind, her jacket powdered white, her cheeks stung red. She gripped a sealed envelope as if she had held onto it through a battle. "You're a hard man to find," she said, breath steaming as she stepped inside. "You sure you've got the right man?" Talon answered, voice rough from cold and caution. "Positive." She handed him the envelope with both hands, as if afraid it might slip away again. "I'm Camille Ortiz, Navajo County Probate Office. I've been carrying this for weeks." He stared at the envelope. Thick paper. Official seal. His name in ink that trembled just slightly from the cold. "It's about your grandmother," Camille said softly. "Shadi Yazi." Talon didn't move. Ashki brushed against his leg, anchoring him. She passed Camille, continued, her voice thinning, almost apologizing for the news she couldn't soften. "She left something behind. For you." Talon exhaled once, steady but sharp. He'd known this moment would come someday. Shadi had been old even when he was a boy, built of desert stone and winter wisdom. But hearing the words still cut deeper than he expected. "What did she leave me?" he asked. Camille handed him a folded deed, a home, up at the Mogollon Rim, built right into the red rock face. She made some unusual notes on the file, mentioned structural warnings below the main foundation. Talon opened the deed. There it was, a blue symbol drawn in her shaky hand, a swirl shaped like flowing water crossed by a single line of listening. It hit him low in the gut. A memory. Shadi kneeling in this dirt, drawing that same symbol with a stick, telling him some people hear the land Talan. Most don't. But you always could. Ashki stepped forward and touched his nose to the symbol on the paper, then lifted his head as if waiting for a sound only he could hear. Camille watched them both, brow furrowed. There's more. Shadi wrote a note in her file. He'll understand when he hears the stone. I don't know what that means. Talan folded the deed quietly. I do. Outside, the wind shifted direction so abruptly, the door shuddered against its hinges. Snow blasted sideways across the highway, blurring everything beyond the parking lot. Camille glanced out uneasily. You should get somewhere warm, she said. That storm's turning ugly. I will, Talon answered, though he wasn't sure where warmth lived anymore. Camille nodded once and slipped back into the storm, her boots disappearing in the thickening snow until she vanished entirely into white silence. Talon stood in the doorway long after she was gone. The wind screamed across the frozen asphalt. The world felt tilted, waiting, holding its breath. Ashki nudged his knee. Yeah, Talon murmured. I know. We need to go. He lifted his backpack, slung it over his shoulder, and looked once more at the blue symbol glowing softly under the faint emergency light. Shadi had left him something. But not just a house. A direction. A calling. A place he'd run from for years, now pulling him back with the force of memory, and something deeper, something he could almost hear in the snow, like a whisper beneath the storm. Talon stepped into the cold. Ashki followed, sure and silent as ever. The storm swallowed them whole as they walked, but there was no uncertainty in Talon's stride. Not anymore. The rim was calling him home. The cliff didn't rise. It waited. The snow thinned as Talon and Ashki left the lowlands behind. The storm still clawed at the pines along the Mogollon rim, shaking loose sheets of powder, but the wind had lost its fury. Talon walked with steady purpose, boots sinking into patches of half-frozen soil where red earth peeked through the white. The air smelled sharper here, like cedar and stone, and something older beneath both. Ashki kept close ears, turning like small radar dishes, alert to every shift in the trees. Talon adjusted the strap of his duffel. His breath puffed out in slow clouds. The deed with Shadi's blue mark rested in his inner pocket, warm from his body. He hadn't looked at it since he left the storm-battered rest stop, but he felt it there, the weight of it unsettling and reassuring at once. The trail narrowed at a bend where the rim opened into a wide overlook. Snow rolled across the valley in soft waves, drifting toward red cliffs that rose and fell like the backs of sleeping giants. Somewhere inside those cliffs waited the house Shadi had built. The thought pulled at him with equal parts dread and longing. Ashki stopped suddenly, tail stiff, head low. What now? Talon murmured, scanning the tree line. A figure emerged from behind a juniper trunk, a rifle slung over one shoulder. Dark hair tied back, orange ranger vest bright against the winter colors. He raised a hand, not threatening, but firm. Talon Nez, the man called. Talon kept his hands visible and nodded once. That's me. The ranger approached with confident steps. He was in his late 20s, sharp eyes, calm voice, steady posture. The kind of man raised, knowing the land's mood changes before the sky speaks it out loud. I'm Kai Redbird, he said. Wildlife ranger for this stretch of the rim. You're heading up to the old Yazzie home. Talon stiffened. Word travels fast, Kai shrugged lightly. Shadi was well known out here. You showing up with her name on a deed is news the cliffs carry. His focus shifted briefly to Ashki. Your dog sensed me before you did. Smart one. He has better instincts than I do half the time, Talon admitted. Kai's expression tightened just enough for Talon to notice. You planning to stay at the house long that the county's business, Talon asked. Kai shook his head. No, just mine. And maybe yours. He gestured to the ground beneath their feet. We've been getting tremors these past few weeks. Strange ones. Not earthquakes, more like hollow shivers through the rock. Talon watched him closely. You think it's dangerous? I think the rim hasn't felt right. Kai's gaze drifted toward the hidden cliffs. Your grandmother kept reports, talked about listening to the land. People said she was eccentric, but she wasn't wrong. The ground here speaks. Talon considered the blue symbol Shadi had drawn on the deed, the old stories. Her voice telling him to listen first. I need to see the house, Talon said simply. Kai nodded. Then I'll walk with you. At least part of the way. They moved side by side along the narrowing trail. The air thinned, colder but sharper, almost electric. Trees parted to reveal a steep incline of red sandstone. Snow clung to grooves etched by wind and time. The path curved upward until the cliffside house came into view. Talon stopped breathing for a moment. It was exactly as Camille had described, but that description hadn't done it justice. The structure blended into the cliff as though the rock had grown a dwelling out of its own ribs. Cedar beams reinforced the opening. A small round window near the top reflected the dim sun like an animal's eye. The wood was weathered silver edges softened by years of storms, but the building stood solid, unshaken. Kai exhaled softly. That place always gave me a strange feeling, like it was built half in this world, half inside the mountain. Shadi built this with her own hands, Talon murmured. She built it with intention, Kai answered. People thought she was listening to spirits. She said she was listening to water. The wind shifted direction, brushing cold fingers across Talon's cheek. Ashki stepped forward cautiously, tail low but not fearful. Drawn, curious. Talon walked up to the house and placed his palm on the cedar door. The wood felt warmer than the air, alive in its own way. He pushed it open. Dust drifted lazily in the light. The interior smelled of cedar sage and old stone scents of childhood he'd forgotten he remembered. A small table, blankets folded with care, shelves lined with jars and notebooks. Everything she owned still stood waiting, as though she expected him to arrive someday, exactly when he was meant to. Ashki circled the room, sniffing corners, analyzing the space with careful precision. Then abruptly, he froze at a section of the floor. Head tilted, ears sharp, body rigid. Again, Talon whispered. Kai watched, uneasy. That's not normal dog behavior. He's hearing something. Talon knelt and pressed his ear to the floorboards. Nothing. No sound he could capture. But Ashki stepped closer, paw tapping firmly on a faint seam, a place where wood met wood just slightly out of line with the rest. Shadi's journals sat on the nearby table. Talon reached for the top one, its leather cover worn smooth. A single phrase was written on the front page in her looping script. If you listen long enough, the stone will speak. Talon unclosed his eyes briefly, remembering the sound from his childhood, the faint rhythmic pulse beneath the ground like a heartbeat too distant to trust as real. He looked at Kai. There's something under this floor. I'd be careful, Kai warned. This ridge holds secrets, some better left alone. Talon stood, hand resting on Ashki's head. I think Shadi wanted me to find it. Kai hesitated, then nodded once. If you need help, I'm usually patrolling near the north trailhead. When Kai stepped outside, the wind carried the scent of storm and stone. Talon watched his silhouette fade into the trees, then knelt again beside the floor, where Ashki waited silent and steady. Something below them whispered too faint for human ears, but not too faint for the dog who had guided him this far. Talon touched the seam and felt a tremor, small, delicate, unmistakable. The mountain was not silent. It was calling. The earth wasn't silent. We simply forgot how to hear it. Ashki didn't move from the seam in the floor. His body was rigid, nose pressed to the wood, as if the sound beneath it pulled at his breath. Talon crouched beside him, sliding his palm slowly across the boards. The faint tremor returned, not strong enough to shake anything, just a soft tap-tap rhythm, subtle as a pulse against a wrist. He leaned closer. Nothing audible. Only the feeling. "Show me," Talon murmured. Ashki shifted, placing his paw against the exact spot. A thin groove, almost invisible unless someone knew where to look. Talon hooked his fingernails under the edge and pushed. The wood resisted at first, as though the house wasn't quite ready to give up its secret. Then, click. A murmured exhale escaped him. The board lifted just enough for him to grasp. Beneath it lay a recessed iron handle. Shadi had hidden something under her home. He pulled the handle up, revealing a square section of the floor that hinged open on heavy silent brackets. Cold air breathed upward from the dark below, clean, mineral-rich, as if untouched for years. Ashki stared down, tail lowered in a posture not of fear, but recognition. Silent, steady recognition. Talon reached for his flashlight, flicked it on, and aimed it into the descending shaft. Cedar walls transitioned into carved sandstone. A rope ladder dangled from iron hooks embedded in the rock, each rung worn smooth. His throat tightened. She really built this. At the bottom, the light revealed a small chamber, low ceiling, rounded walls, wooden beams reinforcing natural stone. The air glinted faintly with dust motes drifting in the flashlight's path. Talon lowered himself onto the ladder. The wood creaked beneath his weight. The deeper he climbed, the quieter everything became. The wind outside faded. The house above muffled. Even his own breaths seemed swallowed by the rock. Ashki waited until Talon reached the bottom, before descending in the practiced, careful movements of a trained rescue dog. His paws found rungs. His body moved with sure intent. Talon didn't speak as he watched him. He didn't need to. Ashki had been trained for mines, collapsed tunnels, situations where silence saved lives. This space was nothing new to him, even if it unnerved Talon. They stepped into the chamber. A single lantern, solar-powered, old but functional, hung on a hook drilled into the wall. Its dim light cast long shadows. Talon brushed his fingers along the sandstone. Smooth in some places, rough in others where human tools had shaped it. The center of the chamber held a wooden work table, a coil of wires, notebooks tied with twine, jars of sediment samples, and a strange machine Talon almost recognized, a hydrophone system, modified and patched together with careful purpose. Shadi's handwriting covered nearly every surface in looping, determined strokes. He walked to the table and ran his fingers over her notes, still crisp, despite years underground. Words leapt from the page, blue singing vein. Pressure dropping, tone fractured, unnatural interference. If this pattern continues, the rim's heart will thin. Talon will know when to listen. His throat tightened again. "How long were you working down here, Shadi?" he whispered. Ashki approached the hydrophone system and sniffed its wires. Talon recognized that posture. It meant awareness, a kind of quiet alertness, not of danger, but importance. He placed the headphones over his ears. Static at first. just a soft hiss. He adjusted the dial, turning it slowly until the noise thinned and a sound rose beneath it. A hum, subtle, low, pulsing like water brushing hollow stone. Then another tone layered beneath it, higher, trembling, bright and fragile like a bell struck underwater. Talon froze. It wasn't just water noise. He'd heard underground springs, river tunnels, and cavern drips across half the globe. None sounded like this. This was rhythmic. This was intentional. This was alive. He lifted one headphone from his ear, heart thudding. "Ashki," he whispered. "Do you hear that?" The dog tilted his head, ears rotating, pupils narrowing. Talon placed the headphone over one of Ashki's ears. The shepherd went still. Then his tail lowered, and he stepped closer to the machine, as if drawn to it. Talon replaced the headphones over his own ears. The hum grew louder as he tuned higher. But the tone was unstable, interrupted by something jagged beneath it. A faint mechanical stutter, like machinery forcing itself into the water's pathway. He twisted the dial again. The interference sharpened. A drill, a pump. Something industrial. Something that did not belong. He pulled the headphones off, breath tight. This vein, it's being hurt. He sat heavily on the wooden stool. Shadi's journals lay open on the table as though waiting for him. He flipped through page after page, the entries forming a pattern of urgency. The water speaks. The earth carries it. The tone weakens when they drill. Someone is taking more than water. Pressure imbalance forming along the canyon's sublayer. If the singing vein breaks the rim, collapses inward, little by little until someone finally listens. He didn't need to guess what they meant. He'd seen trucks on the ridge. Kai had noticed tremors. The county's drilling permits had been contested by half a dozen families. Talon set the journal down, struck by a sudden wave of anger, quiet, but pure. "I should have come sooner," he said under his breath. Ashki brushed his head against Talon's knee, grounding him. A faint vibration shivered through the stone, then different from before. Sharper, more erratic. The lantern flickered. Talon stood quickly. That wasn't the water. Ashki stared at the ceiling, ears tense. Someone or something was moving above them. Footsteps, a vehicle. Wind wouldn't cause a vibration that direct. The lantern trembled again. Talon helped Ashki climb the ladder before ascending after him. He pushed the hatch open and emerged into the house, breath steaming in the cold air. Wind moaned through the cedar beams, but the vibration he'd felt underground didn't return. He stepped to the window, peering through frost-covered glass. The trail below was empty, but snow still shifted as if something heavy had passed through moments earlier. Not a storm gust. Tracks. Fresh ones. Ashki paced near the door, tail stiff, head turning toward the forest. The mountain wasn't silent, and it wasn't alone. Talon rested a hand on the dog's back and whispered, "Someone's watching this place." The wind answered with a hollow sigh that sounded too much like agreement. Her notes were not the ramblings of an old woman. They were coordinates to a dying heartbeat. Talon didn't sleep that night. The cliffside house creaked softly under the weight of the wind, its cedar beams groaning like a living thing. Ashki lay at the threshold between rooms, head lifted, ears turning at every sound. Talon sat at the small table beneath the round window, Shadi's journals spread before him like scattered pieces of a broken code. Lantern light carved shadows across the pages. Ink loops, diagrams of water veins, hand-drawn maps of underground channels, all of it built into a puzzle he never knew existed. He read through the pages slowly, reverently, feeling something inside him tighten with each line. The tone weakens when they force the pressure wrong. Steel disrupts the rhythm. The singing vein can be wounded. He pressed his palms against his eyes, fighting off the sharp sting behind them. Guilt, maybe, or something close to shame. He should have been here. Shadi had needed him long before the world turned its back on him. Instead, he'd walked away and let the silence between them stretch too long. Ashki suddenly lifted his head, muscles hardening beneath his fur. Talan froze. What is it now? The dog didn't growl this time. He just stared toward the window, body tight, listening to something Talan couldn't hear. The wind outside paused just a moment, but long enough to feel like the world inhaled sharply. Talon rose from the table, crossed the room, and peered outside. Fresh tire tracks cut through the snow-carpeted trail below the house, long, narrow, and deep enough to belong to a heavy vehicle. They hadn't been there during the hike in, and they weren't covered in snow, which meant someone had come by within the last hour. The trucks Kai mentioned. The ones he said didn't belong on the ridge. The ones that rattled the earth. Talon's jaw clenched. We're not alone up here. He wasn't sure what to do with that fact, not yet. But he knew who would. He gathered Shadi's notebooks into his duffel, slipped on his coat, and checked the hydrophone room one last time. The machine still hummed faintly, the water tone weaving in and out of static interference. He listened for a moment, letting the rhythm settle into him. There was pain in that hum, disturbance, strain. He turned it off and climbed back to the main room. Ashki followed him to the door without being told. They started the descent toward town at sunrise. The trail cut between pines, dusted in frost sap, glinting like trapped stars. The rim rose and fell like a great red spine around them, the cliffs glowing faintly pink as morning wrapped itself around the stone. Talon kept checking the tree line. Nothing moved. But he felt watched. When the library came into view on the outskirts of Winslow, a squat brick building with turquoise trim, painted by local artists, Talon exhaled the breath he'd been holding since dawn. Nora Begay stood behind the front desk, in a purple wool cardigan, sorting returned books with the precision of someone who found comfort in order. Her silver hair was tied in a low bun, and she wore the kind of glasses that seemed capable of peering through excuses. Her head lifted the moment Talon entered. A smile flickered in her eyes, though her mouth stayed serious. You look like you've been carrying a storm on your back. A storm and Shadi's ghost, Talon answered. Ashki trotted in beside him, sniffing the carpet. Nora reached down to scratch behind his ears. Look at you, guardian boy. You've been busy. Talon placed Shadi's journals on the desk. I found something under her house. Nora blinked, then slowly eased into a chair. What kind of something? A listening room. She built it into the stone. She tracked water sounds underneath the ridge. Not random sounds, tones. Patterns. Like the land was breathing. Nora opened one notebook and ran her fingers across Shadi's handwriting, with a tenderness that tightened Talon Tan's chest. She always said the rim had a voice. She wasn't wrong, he said quietly. Before Nora could speak, the library door swung open again. A tall man in a gray coat carrying two bulging messenger bags stumbled in glasses, fogged hair wild from wind. He looked exactly as Talon remembered from years ago when Shadi introduced them in passing. Dr. Elias Tenorio, the hydrologist who treated water like scripture. He exhaled hard when he saw Talon, as if relieved. You found the chamber. Talon stared. How did you know? Elias dropped his bags onto the table and pulled off his gloves with shaky urgency. Because Shadi sent me a letter before she died. Said you'd come home eventually, and when you did, you'd need help understanding what she recorded. He pulled a folded paper from his coat pocket, the handwriting unmistakably Shadi's. The earth sings Elias. The singing vein is thinning. Protect him when he hears it. Elias looked at Talan Samphen with eyes heavy with truth. Show me what she left. Talan opened the journals pointing to the diagrams and frequency charts. Elias studied them silently, brow tightening with each page. Pressure drops, he muttered. Irregular pulses. He tapped a finger against a line Shadi had drawn. See this jagged pattern? That's industrial interference. Talan felt heat rise in his chest. You mean drilling or siphoning? Elias swallowed hard. Someone's tapping into the water artery. And not carefully. Nora closed the journal slowly. Suntrace has been requesting new extraction permits for months. And moving trucks at night, Talon added. I saw their tracks near the rim. Elias leaned forward. If they're drilling where I think they are, they could collapse the entire hydrological layer. Not just the singing vein, the whole section of the rim could destabilize. Talon felt the weight of Shadi's blue-marked blessing settle heavier inside his coat. Ashki's sudden growl sliced the air. All three turned. The dog's eyes were fixed on the doorway, muscles tense. Then came the sound, tires crunching slowly over icy gravel just outside. A truck. Heavy. Too close. Nora whispered, Someone followed you. Talon didn't move, didn't breathe. He only watched the shadow shifting under the doorframe as the truck idled. Whoever was inside wasn't leaving. Elias whispered, We need to show this to the council. Today. Outside, the engine rumbled a warning. The land wasn't the only thing being listened to. Truth doesn't tremble, but men with power do. The council hall in Winslow buzzed with voices long before Talon stepped inside. Cold air clung to his coat as he crossed the threshold. Ashki pressed close to his leg. Nora Begay walked ahead of them with a box of Shadi's journals clutched against her ribs, and Dr. Elias Tenorio carried diagrams rolled beneath his arm, his jaw, tight eyes sharp with the tension of someone preparing for a battle fought with maps instead of weapons. Talon scanned the room. Tribal council members sat at long tables facing the community. County officials occupied another row. Town residents filled the folding chairs, the scrape of boots echoing as more people filed in. The heating system murmured a soft whine overhead, and in the center near the front, stone-faced, spotless suit hair, slicked back like polished obsidian, stood Raymond Cole, Suntrace's representative. He leaned casually against the podium, greeting officials with soft handshakes, nodding as though he were a friend of the community. But his eyes held a quiet steel, watching everything, calculating. Talon felt the same unease he used to feel before a firefight. Not fear, but recognition of an enemy who didn't need to shout to show danger. A woman approached with a microphone in hand, her voice carrying above the chatter. Meeting will begin shortly. Please take your seats. Elias nudged Talon. Don't let your guard down. Cole's not alone in this room. Talon glanced around. Men he didn't recognize flanked the walls. Men too polished for small-town government meetings. Their boots too new, their jackets corporate-issue winter coats. Suntrace watchers. The council session opened with formalities, then the chairperson cleared his throat. We will first hear from Mr. Nez, Dr. Tenorio, and Ms. Begay regarding concerns over the Mogollon Rim water structure. Nora gave Talon a gentle push forward. Elias joined him at the front. Ashki sat at his heel-tall, alert, silent, watching the room as though guarding a checkpoint. The microphone crackled slightly as Talon spoke. My grandmother Shadi Yazi studied the land her whole life. She built a chamber in her home where she could listen to the water moving inside the cliffs. What she found there, what I found there, shows the rim is being damaged by drilling that was never permitted. He opened Shadi's journals, pages filled with diagrams and frequencies. Nora laid out maps Shadi had drawn by hand. Elias placed his hydrology chart beside them. Elias stepped forward, adjusting his glasses. What you're looking at are pressure signatures recorded over 15 years. The older readings show a stable, healthy aquifer. But look at these. He tapped a graph filled with jagged red lines. This is the past 7 months. The disruptions are mechanical, consistent with deep industrial pumps running off location from their approved sites. A murmur rippled through the audience. Nora lifted Shadi's map. These channels run beneath tribal land and county soil. You disrupt them, you disrupt everything: wells, springs, irrigation, even the cliffs. She warned us years ago. No one listened. Raymond Cole pushed himself from the wall, strolling forward with slow, practiced steps. If I may respond. The chair nodded reluctantly. Cole smiled, polite, almost warm. While I appreciate the passion in this room, we cannot confuse personal theories with geological fact. Suntrace has followed every regulation. Our drilling sites are fully documented. He gestured toward Talon without looking at him. And, Mr. As though I respect his service, is hardly qualified to make hydrological claims. Ashkey's ears shot forward. A low rumble vibrated in his chest. Cole continued. And as for Miss Yazzie, she was beloved, yes. But she was elderly. She spent decades chasing ideas about singing water, which I believe many here recognize as folk tradition, not science. Talon's fists tightened. She didn't imagine the water hum. I heard it. Elias heard it. Cole ignored him and addressed the council. We must not allow unverified stories or personal grief to disrupt operations that benefit the entire county. Benefit, Elias snapped. Your drilling is destabilizing the rim. Cole's smile thinned. You claim illegal drilling. Where is your proof? Before Elias could answer, the back door opened. A woman stepped in quietly, notebook tucked under her arm, camera hanging from her shoulder. Dark hair, steady eyes, Mara Tsinajini. She slipped into a seat near the aisle, gaze fixed on the front, like she'd been waiting for an explosion. Nora stepped forward, voice trembling with controlled anger. You called Shadi's work superstition, but she documented everything. Pressure readings, tone distortions, water clarity, even geological shifts. Cole chuckled softly. Tone distortions. Right. The council chair bristled. Mr. Cole, please remain respectful. Of course, he said smoothly, though his eyes swept the room like a blade. Talon felt heat rising in his chest. He stepped closer to the microphone. The water vein has changed. I heard the interference myself, and I saw your trucks on the ridge. At night, on trails you don't have permits for. Cole's eyes sharpened. You have no evidence of that. Talon stared him down. I know what I saw. Cole leaned in just slightly. PTSD often causes misinterpretation of sensory input. Noise sounds like voices. Shadows appear as threats. I understand your condition, Mr. Nez. The words struck like a slap. Ashkey rose instantly, body-stiff teeth bared in a silent snarl. The room froze. Nora gasped. Elias cursed under his breath. Several council members stood halfway from their seats. Cole stepped back just enough to show fear without admitting it. Mara scribbled rapidly into her notebook. Talon knelt, placing a steadying hand on Ashkey's neck. Enough, he whispered. The dog eased only a degree. Talon rose again. My condition has nothing to do with what your drills are doing to this land. The water is changing. The rim is shaking. And if it collapses, all of us will pay for it. The council chair lifted a hand. We will reconvene after examining these materials. For now, this session is suspended. Cole offered a thin smile. We appreciate your time. He turned to leave, but his eyes locked on Talon, cold, calculating promising trouble. As people dispersed, Mara approached quiet as snowfall. You weren't wrong, she said softly. Everything he said was rehearsed. That man's terrified. Not of you, of what you know. Talon gathered the journals. Ashki pressed against his leg, ears angled toward the exit where Cole had disappeared. Mara stepped closer. If you're willing to talk, I'm listening. Talon didn't answer. He didn't trust his voice. The hydrophone's hum echoed in his memory, wounded trembling. Something beneath the rim was screaming for help, and someone above it wanted that scream silenced. Sometimes the land warns us through the only voice it has left danger. The library emptied slowly after the council hearing, but the tension clung to Talon's skin like dust. He hadn't forgotten the way Raymond Cole watched him from the doorway, before leaving a look sharp enough to slice through the winter air. Oshki hadn't forgotten either. The German shepherd kept glancing toward the windows, nose lifting with each passing tire outside, as if memorizing every engine's scent. Elias packed Shadi's journals into his satchel. We need to organize these tonight, he said, voice hushed but urgent. Cole's a professional liar. The only way to challenge his claims is with data so solid even he can't twist it. Nora pulled the blinds shut. Data won't matter if Suntrace decides to handle this outside a meeting room. Her eyes drifted to the fresh tire tracks visible through the glass. They don't intimidate openly. They haunt. Talon nodded once. They followed me from the cliff house. Mara Tsinajini, who had stayed behind, uncapped her pen and leaned against a table. Then the story's bigger than I thought. She scribbled quickly. I want exclusive interviews with all three of you. But first we need to get out of here before one of those trucks decides to park out back. Ashki gave a single sharp bark, not a warning, but a command to move. That was enough. They left through the side door, keeping to the alley, where snow collected in thin ridges. Mara climbed into her SUV, promising to make contact soon. Elias headed toward the university lab. Nora locked the library door with trembling fingers before turning to Talon. You watch yourself, she whispered. Shadi always said the rim carried old wounds. Your grandmother knew when the mountain hurt. Now it's your turn. Talon pulled his coat tighter. I'll take care. Ashki pressed against his leg, eyes reflecting a flicker of understanding. Talon felt that familiar warmth in the dog, a steadiness that had carried him through places far darker than a cold Arizona night. They started walking back toward the community center, where Talon planned to rest, before taking the next step. But the wind changed direction, suddenly sweeping down the main street in a violent rush that rattled the lampposts. A hollow whistle threaded through the air, thin, sharp, unmistakably unnatural. Ashki stopped mid-step and stiffened. Talon's heart jolted. What is it? The dog bolted toward the courthouse without waiting for instruction. Talon sprinted after him, boots sliding slightly on the ice-slicked sidewalk. Ashki reached the side entrance first, pawing frantically at the door, barking in a panicked rhythm Talon had only heard in war zones. Talon, a voice called from behind. Kai Redbird jogged up from the opposite direction. Snow on his jacket, breath steaming. I was on night patrol and saw you running. "What's wrong?" Ashkey barked again, pressing his nose against the base of the courthouse door. His hackles rose not from aggression, but urgency. Desperate urgency. Talon yanked the door handle. Locked. Kai produced a utility key from his belt. The county hires rangers for after-hours emergencies. This just became one. He unlocked the door. A bitter rush of cold air spilled out, and beneath it a faint hiss. Something chemical. Something dangerous. Talon froze. That's gas. Kai's eyes widened. Damn it, where is it coming from? Ashkey lunged down the hallway, nails clicking sharply across linoleum. Talon and Kai followed the dog through echoing corridors until Ashkey skidded to a stop outside a maintenance room. He whined, high-pitched, frantic, before barking in 3 sharp bursts. Talon's stomach dropped. That was Ashkey's imminent danger code, the one that had saved Talon's entire unit overseas. Kai slapped a hand over his mouth and nose. We need to evacuate the building now. Talon pushed Ashkey back. Stay behind me. He opened the maintenance door a crack. Gas seeped out in a visible shimmer. The old steel pipe along the wall had ruptured down its seams, spraying thin plumes of vapor that pooled near the heater vents. One spark, one wrong electrical flicker, and the courthouse would turn into an inferno. Talon slammed the door shut. Fire alarms, Kai asked. No, Talon said. Gas is too concentrated. We need fresh air and distance. Kai darted down the hallway, banging on office doors and shouting for everyone to evacuate. Within seconds, the building erupted with startled voices and hurried footsteps. People poured into the hallways, clerks, officers, late-night custodians. Panic rose as someone shouted about the smell. Ashkey remained planted beside Talon, tail-stiff ears rotating rapidly. Watching. Listening. Guarding. When the last person stumbled out the front entrance, Kai and Talon emerged behind them. The cold night air rushed into the building, thinning the gas. But the danger wasn't gone. Fire trucks wailed in the distance. People clustered at the bottom of the courthouse steps, shaking, confused. One woman sobbed into her hands. A clerk muttered that she'd smelled something strange earlier, but hadn't been sure. Talon exhaled slowly, grounding himself. Ashkey found it, he said quietly. He saved everyone in there. Kai stared at the dog with new respect. That's not just training. That's instinct on another level. Ashkey settled beside Talon, chest rising and falling with controlled breaths. His eyes remained fixed on the building until firefighters barreled inside with detectors. A county official approached Talon, trembling. If you hadn't gotten us out. She swallowed hard. Thank you. Talon nodded, though thanks felt heavy. This wasn't heroism. It was necessity. Fire crews soon confirmed the rupture. Old Pipe One said, years of corrosion. Lucky someone caught it. Kai shot Talon a look. Lucky is one word. Nora arrived moments later, breathless, coat half-buttoned. I heard the alarm. Is everyone safe? Talon nodded. Thanks to him. She bent to rub Ashkey's neck. Good boy. Good boy. Elias messaged Talon's phone at that moment. Saw the evacuation. Are you safe? We need to accelerate our plan. Suntrace won't sit still now. Talon looked up at the courthouse, its windows glowing under emergency lights. Something vibrated in his chest, a quiet understanding that the timing of the pipe rupture wasn't random. It was a symptom of something deeper, a warning the land had given them through dangerous means. And Ashkey hadn't hesitated. Wind swept through the streets again, colder this time. Heavy clouds gathered far beyond the rooftops, rolling toward the rim like an omen. A storm was building, and not just in the sky. The snow swallowed the world whole, but one voice still reached us. The storm arrived without mercy. By dawn, the Mogollon Rim vanished behind a curtain of white so dense it erased the horizon. Wind screamed along the cliff edges, tossing sheets of powder into the air until the entire world looked like it had been scraped clean of shape and color. Talon had seen sandstorms bury outposts overseas, but this was different. This storm felt personal, as if the land itself was warning him to pay attention. Ashki paced restlessly inside the cliff house, nails tapping lightly against the cedar floor. Every so often he froze mid-step, nose lifting toward the wind, listening for something only he could hear. Talon had learned not to question those moments. The dog's instincts had never failed him. Elias arrived just past mid-morning snow caked in his hair and scarf, knocking on the door with the urgency of a man carrying bad news through worse weather. Talon opened the door before he could knock again, pulling him inside. "You walked in this?" Talon asked, brushing snow from Elias's shoulders. "Drove until I couldn't walk." "The rest," Elias answered, breath fogging heavily. "Wasn't optional." He set his satchel on the table and fumbled out a stack of papers sealed in a weatherproof folder. His hands shook not from cold, but from the weight of whatever he carried. "These were left on my cabin porch before dawn," he said. "No name, no message. Just dropped and gone." Talon opened the folder. Drilling maps, pressure reports, equipment manifests, documents stamped with Sun Trace's logo, but clearly never meant for public eyes, and on the corner of one deep-bore Directive 7 coordinates matching the thin section of the singing vein. The weakest point. Talon's jaw tightened. "They're drilling exactly where Shadi warned against." Elias nodded grimly. "If they've already broken through, the upper shell water pressure would be unstable. A big storm like this could push it past the limit." Ashki suddenly snarled, sharp, alarming teeth flashing. He rushed to the window, paws scraping against the sill. Talon followed, pulling back the curtain. White. Nothing but white swirling violently across the ridge. Then movement. Headlights flickered through the blizzard. "Someone's out there," Talon said. "Damn it," Elias whispered. "Who'd be driving?" And this Ashki barked one powerful, urgent sound that sent a jolt down Talon's spine. "It's not just a passing truck," Talon said. "He wants us to follow." As if in answer, Ashki bounded to the door and pawed it with frantic insistence. Talon grabbed his coat and gloves. Elias stared in disbelief. "You're going out into that, someone's in trouble," Talon said. "Or trying to warn us." Elias grabbed his own coat. "Then I'm coming too." They stepped outside into the storm's roar. Snow slapped their faces, stinging like grit. Wind shoved against their bodies, nearly knocking Elias off balance. Ashki surged ahead, guiding them through the white void. Talon followed closely, one hand gripping the dog's harness when the wind grew too fierce. The headlights appeared again closer, then vanished behind a wall of blowing snow. Talon shouted, "This way," though his voice vanished as soon as it left him. Ashki pulled him toward the cliff's lower road. The wind eased for a moment, just long enough for the scene to emerge through the storm's curtain. A Suntrace pickup sat at a dangerous angle, half crushed beneath a slab of fallen ice and rock. The passenger side window had shattered inward. Snow poured into the cab, burying the seats. A faint cry rose above the storm, a hoarse plea for help. Talon rushed forward, Elias close behind. Ashki circled the truck, barking toward the crushed cabin. "Someone's alive in there," Elias said. Talon braced himself against the truck door and forced it open. A young Suntrace worker slumped inside, blood streaking down his temple, breathing shallowly. Two more groans came from the back seat. Two additional workers, bruised and dazed. "Please," the driver whispered. We were told to move the equipment before the audit." they said. Hurry! Talon steadied him. Save your breath. We've got you. He and Elias worked quickly, pulling the men free from the wreck. Ashki stayed glued to their side, sensing every shift in the falling ice overhead. One crack after another echoed along the ridge. We need to move, Elias shouted. These cliffs are unstable, with the injured workers supported between them. Talon and Elias pushed through the snow, following Ashki's lead back toward stable ground. Another rumble thundered behind them, followed by the crash of more rock and ice collapsing across the road they had just left. None of them looked back. By the time they reached the shelter of the tree line, all three workers were conscious, shaken, terrified, and shivering violently. One grabbed Talon's sleeve. They said to keep quiet. They said if anyone asked, we were doing soil sampling. His voice cracked. But they were drilling. They hit something. The ground started shaking. Elias closed his eyes briefly, pain tightening his features. The singing vein. Talon focused on the trembling worker. You're safe now. No, the young man whispered. None of us are safe. Not if they keep drilling. Ashki stepped beside him, nudging his hand, gently grounding him. The storm howled again, rattling branches overhead. But through it, Talon heard something else, a new vibration beneath the wind, faint but unmistakable. The water vein. Its pulse was weakening. Elias met his gaze. This is all the proof we needed. The worker leaned forward, voice hoarse. I'll talk. I'll tell everything. Just don't let them bury this. Talon glanced toward the rim, swallowed by the storm. Every instinct he possessed, every lesson from Shadi, every warning from Kai, every growl from Ashki pointed to the same truth. The land was running out of time, and Suntrace wasn't done yet. When truth leaks, no amount of money can dam the flood. The storm had died by morning, but the world it left behind felt altered, its silence heavy, as if the rim itself was holding its breath. Talon stood outside the clinic in Winslow, where the rescued Suntrace workers were being treated. The sharp scent of disinfectant mixed with pine carried in through the automatic doors. Ashki stood at his side, tail still, ears alert, watching every car that passed with the diligence of a soldier. Elias exited the clinic with a stack of printed statements, his expression grim and invigorated at once. 2 of them signed affidavits already, he said. They confirmed everything illegal, drilling unreported, bore points orders to hide equipment before the storm. Talon nodded. And the 3rd, he's scared, Elias said softly, terrified. But he said he'll talk when the investigators arrive. Nora Begay joined them from across the parking lot, coat buttoned tight against the lingering chill. I spoke with the tribal council. They're calling an emergency session today. Suntrace won't be able to bury this under bureaucracy anymore. Before Talon could answer, a white SUV pulled up. Mara Tsinajinia climbed out, her camera already slung over her shoulder, notebook in hand. She walked toward them with determined steps, the way a person moves when they know a story has cracked wide open. Morning, she said. If you were trying to keep this quiet, too late. I've got 3 confirmed sources and a photo of the crash site. And now that I've seen the documents in Elias's possession, I'm ready to publish the first exposé tonight. Elias lifted a brow. Tonight? Truth ages fast, Mara replied. This one needs to land while the ink is still hot. Talon kept his eyes on the street. A black truck rolled slowly past the clinic windows, tinted too dark to see the driver. Ashki growled low, but the truck kept moving, turning the corner and disappearing. Mara followed Talon's gaze. They're watching you, she said. Watching all of us. Nora hugged her coat tighter. Suntrace can't stop the truth from coming out. That depends on how desperate they are, Mara said quietly. Corporations don't panic unless they feel cornered. Suntrace is cornered. Talon set his jaw, thoughts drifting back to the singing veins fracture, the trembling pulse beneath Shadi's listening chamber. If they're panicking, that means they know the rim is unstable. That's exactly why we need to move fast, Elias said. I ran those pressure models again last night. If drilling continues at even half capacity, the vein's shell could rupture within days. Mara's eyes sharpened. Then let's make sure they can't keep drilling at all. A cold wind slipped through the parking lot, carrying the distant scent of wet stone. Talon felt the land whisper beneath it, the same quiet warning that had carried him up the mountain in the first place. They headed to the tribal council building together. The walk through town felt different than usual. People watched them pass, some with curiosity, some with fear, and some with gratitude. News traveled fast in Winslow, even before Mara's article hit. Inside the council chamber, the atmosphere was electric. Tribal leaders, county officials, and community members crowded the room. Papers rustled. Phones buzzed. Conversations rose and fell like breaking waves. Talon noticed Kai Redbird standing near the back wall, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the front. The ranger nodded once, a quiet acknowledgement of the stakes. The council chair lifted a hand to quiet the room. We have received credible allegations of illegal drilling by Suntrace Water and Minerals, he announced. We will review the documents presented today. Elias stepped forward and laid out the maps and pressure reports. Nora followed with Shadi's journals. Mara set down printouts of witness statements and the photos she'd taken at the crash site. But it was the testimony of the rescued workers that shifted the room's energy. One of them, bandaged but steady, walked up to the podium with support from a nurse. He gripped the microphone tightly, knuckles white. They told us to drill past the markers. Told us to ignore the boundary lines, he said. When we broke through the shell, the ground shook so hard, I thought the cliff was going to collapse under us. Murmurs rippled through the room. The worker swallowed. We heard something in the water. A sound. At first it was a hum. Then it went sharp, like it was crying. His voice cracked. I've never heard anything like it. None of us had. Talon felt something cold run down his spine. Elias spread another map across the table. This is the bore line. They drilled directly into the singing vein's thinnest section. The council chair stared at the map. Why would they do that? Nora answered softly. Because it's where the water runs purest, and where it's easiest to extract. They put profit above the entire rim, Kai said from the back. They put every family in Winslow at risk. The room erupted with voices, anger, disbelief, fear. Raymond Cole entered then late and unapologetic, flanked by two Suntrace attorneys. His smile was small and cold. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, we understand emotions are high, but we must not jump to conclusions. Anyone can forge maps. Anyone can claim. Mara rose from her seat, holding her camera. These photos show your truck at an illegal bore site during a storm. Elias held up the technical printouts. And these frequency signatures match your pumps. The injured worker stepped closer to the mic, voice shaking. You told us we'd get bonuses if we lied. I'm done lying. Cole's mask slipped for a heartbeat, revealing raw panic beneath the polish. The attorneys whispered urgently to him, but the room had already turned, every eye on Suntrace, every whisper damning. Mara closed her notebook, her voice calm and certain. You can't bury this anymore. The council chair spoke over the noise. Effective immediately, Suntrace drilling operations on tribal land are suspended pending investigation. Cole tried to protest, but his words were lost to the wave of voices that rose against him. Talon didn't speak. He didn't need to. The tide had shifted. Outside the clouds thickened heavy gray and silent. Elias stepped beside him. "This isn't over," he said quietly. Talon looked toward the rim, barely visible through the haze. Something trembled in the earth beneath their feet, not enough for others to sense, but enough for him. Enough for Ashki, who pressed against his side with a low, uneasy whine. The singing vein was still hurting. And even stripped of power, Suntrace wasn't done fighting. The mountain shook once, not in anger but in warning. The wind rose at dusk, carrying a low vibration that rolled through the pine branches like a whispered omen. Talon felt it before he heard it, a faint tremor that brushed the soles of his boots and crawled up the bones of his legs. Ashki stiffened beside him, ears pricking toward the ridge, body tightening with instinctive dread. Elias Tenorio stood a few steps ahead, squinting through the dimming light at the mouth of the maintenance tunnel Suntrace had carved illegally into the rim. Snow still clung to the metal supports, but the interior flickered faintly with failing emergency lights. The investigation team, a mix of tribal hydrologists, state inspectors, and 2 federal engineers, waited behind them, bundled in heavy jackets, prepared for a night of long and dangerous work. Talon wiped his palms on his coat. "You're sure we need to go down there?" Elias didn't look back. "The singing vein won't survive another pressure cycle. We have to reroute flow before the pumps shut off completely. If they fail without stabilization..." He trailed off, but the unspoken consequence lingered like thunder. Collapse. Sinkholes. Catastrophe. Kai Redbird stepped forward from the team flashlight tucked under his arm. "The tunnel's unstable." Last tremor knocked out half the support beams. His voice was steady, but worry shadowed it. "You really want us inside that?" Elias swallowed. "It's the only way." Talon clicked on his headlamp. "Then let's go." Ashki moved immediately to his side, ready. The first steps into the tunnel felt like stepping into the throat of something wounded. Cold air pulsed in sharp bursts, carrying the metallic tang of machinery mixed with wet stone. The deeper they went, the more the hum beneath the earth intensified. Not the rhythmic, living hum Talon had heard through Shadi's hydrophone, but a strained, ragged sound like water forced through a narrowing vein. The walls were rough, scraped by illegal drilling. Cables dangled from the ceiling, swaying with each rumble. Ashki's paws landed silently on the gravel nose, twitching constantly, muscles taut with focused energy. Elias studied the pressure gauge strapped to his wrist. "Flow rate's climbing. We're close to critical." "Then let's move faster," Talon said. They reached the main chamber, an enormous cavern carved directly into the rim's interior. Machinery whirred in chaotic rhythms, sputtering as Suntrace's abandoned pumps strained at their last breaths. The ground beneath them shook harder than before. Kai steadied himself against a steel beam. That wasn't a tremor. That was the vein. Water glistened along the far wall, seeping through the rock in narrow rivulets that shimmered with a faint blue tint. The singing vein's shell had cracked. Talon could feel the sound of it more than hear it, a shivering note that pulsed straight into the marrow of his bones. Elias crouched near the pressure valves. "We need to shut down the pumps in sequence, not all at once. Otherwise the pressure will spike." Talon knelt beside him. "Tell us what to do." Elias pointed. "You and Kai handle the relay switches. I'll manage flow rate and stabilize the main line." Kai nodded and darted toward the far wall. Talon followed, ducking under metal supports and weaving through fallen debris. The storm outside had weakened the tunnel. Cracks spiderwebbed through the ceiling. Ashki stayed glued to Talon's side, sniffing the air sharply. Twice he pulled Talon away from loose rubble before it could fall on him. Each time Talon whispered a fleeting good boy before pushing forward. At the relay panel, Kai flipped open the control box. Half these wires are fried. Which ones do we need? Talon asked. Kai traced a finger along the panel. Yellow, blue, and green. Don't touch the red unless you want the whole place to blow. Talon reached for the yellow switch and froze as the floor lurched violently beneath them. Dust rained from the ceiling. Metal shrieked. Elias shouted from across the chamber. Now, Talon, flip it now! Talon slammed the yellow switch down. Kai hit the blue. The machinery groaned, gears locking one by one. Elias adjusted the main valve, sweat beating at his temple despite the cold. The pressure's dropping slowly, Elias called. We need the green relay. Talon reached for it, and Ashki suddenly snarled, lunging forward and knocking Talon sideways just as a slab of concrete crashed down where he'd been standing. The blast of dust blinded him for a moment. Heart pounding, he grabbed Ashki's harness and steadied himself. Thank you, he breathed. Kai coughed through the dust cloud. He saved your life again. Talon pulled the green switch. The chamber changed instantly. The unstable hum of the vane steadied by a fraction, just enough for Talon to feel the difference deep inside his chest. Elias twisted the final valve, and the remaining pumps sputtered again, then fell silent. A long, low tremor rolled through the cavern so deep, it felt like the mountain itself sighing. That's it, Elias whispered. She's stabilizing. But even as relief washed over them, a dull cracking echoed high above. Kai pointed upward. The ceiling. A jagged fissure tore across the chamber roof, widening inch by inch. If the tunnel collapsed now, they'd be buried beneath tons of stone. Out, Elias shouted. They ran. Ashki sprinted ahead, guiding their path with uncanny precision. Falling debris crashed behind them, slamming into the ground in thunderous bursts. Talon grabbed Elias's arm when he stumbled. Kai shielded them from a shower of loose rock. The tunnel shook again, harder, angrier, but the humming beneath the stone was no longer panicked. The singing vein was adjusting, recalibrating, alive. They burst from the mouth of the tunnel just as the entrance caved inward, sealing itself with a final roar. Snow blew across the collapsed rock, and the wind carried a soft, rhythmic vibration, a gentler hum, steady and sure. Elias bent over, hands on his knees. We did it. Kai released a breath that turned to mist. Barely. Talon looked toward the rim, feeling the pulse of the vein echo faintly through the ground. Ashki pressed against his leg-tail, swaying in slow, exhausted gratitude. But as the wind shifted, a new sound drifted toward them, a series of engines approaching from the distant road. Not rescue vehicles. Suntrace wasn't finished. Some homes call you back not to remember but to begin again. The engines faded into the distance without turning toward the rim. Not Suntrace. Not a threat. Just trucks on the highway carrying their own burdens through the settling storm. Still, the tension stayed lodged in Talon's chest until the sound dissolved into wind. Snow drifted down in soft spirals as Kai and Elias made their way back toward the cliff house. The air felt different now, lighter, as if the mountain had exhaled after holding its breath for too long. The hum beneath the ground had steadied the frantic pulsing, replaced by something calmer, almost familiar. Ashki trotted several steps ahead, tail swaying gently, no longer rigid with warning, but relaxed in the quiet pride of a job done right. Every now and then he turned to look at Talon, as though making sure his human was still following this new rhythm the earth had reclaimed. By the time the house came into view, the sky had begun to clear. Pale blue light stretched across the horizon. The cliffside home glowed softly, its cedar beams warmed by dawn, even as snow gathered on the rooftop. For the first time since arriving, Talan didn't feel like an intruder in the space. He felt like someone returning. Elias sank onto the bench outside the house, rubbing his hands together. Once investigators finish with Suntrace, they'll close every illegal bore site. His breath plumed in the cold. They don't know it yet, but their operation is already finished. Kai leaned against a pine trunk, watching the rim with steady, quiet eyes. And the land will heal. Slowly maybe, but it will. Talan placed a hand against the house's outer beam. The wood vibrated faintly, not from machinery, not from tremor, but from the hum beneath the stone, the same hum Shadi had listened to for decades. Steady. Alive. No longer screaming. He felt tears prick behind his eyes, but blinked them back. She knew what she was doing, he murmured. Elias nodded. She did. And so did you. Inside the house was warm from the small fire he'd lit earlier. Nora arrived just after sunrise, carrying a stack of folded cloths and a small wooden box carved with traditional patterns. You did it, she said as she stepped inside. Her smile was tired, but it bloomed wide and proud. The council wants to meet with you later, but this... She set the wooden box on the table. This is from Shadi. Talan paused before touching it. She left something else, Nora nodded. She asked me to give it to you when the vein was safe again. Talan opened the box slowly. Inside lay a carved pendant on a leather cord. The symbol etched into the wood matched the one on the deed, the swirl of flowing water crossed with the mark of listening. His grandmother's voice rose inside him, soft, as memory steady as truth. Some people hear the land, Talan, and some are meant to protect it. He closed his fingers around the pendant. It felt warm, as if holding the last echo of her touch. Outside voices approached, light, curious voices. Children's laughter drifted through the air before the door swung open, and 3 young kids peeked in, followed by a tribal councilwoman who offered an apologetic wave. Sorry, she said. They insisted on seeing the place. They wanted to hear the story from the man who saved the singing vein. Talan blinked. I didn't save it alone. Kai stepped in behind her. Doesn't matter. You listened. The kids gathered around Ashki, who accepted their gentle pats with dignified patience. One boy pointed at the floor. Is this where the secret room is? Talan couldn't help a small smile. Maybe. Elias chuckled. Not yet open to public tours, but give it time. Later in the morning, community members began trickling up the trail, some with food, some with blankets, some with nothing but gratitude. News had spread faster than the storm. Suntrace's operations were suspended indefinitely. Their executives were under investigation. Mara's article had gone statewide within hours, picked up by national outlets before dawn. People brought offerings to honor Shadi sage bundles, woven prayer loops, a jar of river stones. Someone placed a carved plaque on the table with her name and the words, "The woman who heard the water sing." By afternoon, council leaders had gathered outside the house. They stood facing the cliff, the hum beneath their feet, faint but steady. We want to restore this place, the chairwoman said. Turn it into a listening center. A place for children to learn, for researchers to study, for the community to reconnect with the land she protected. Talan looked around at the gathering, the elders, the children, the neighbors, the land itself breathing quietly beneath them. Ashki pressed against his side as if urging him to speak. I'll stay, Talan said. If you want me to, I'll help any way I can. A ripple of approval moved through the group. Nora touched his arm gently. She'd be proud. He wasn't sure he could answer without his voice breaking, so he nodded once and let the wind carry his gratitude. As evening settled and the last visitors departed, Talan stood alone on the small porch. The sun dipped low, washing the red cliffs in gold. Ashki sat beside him, gaze fixed on the horizon. The hum beneath the floorboards rose faintly, like a song warming itself for night. Talan slipped the pendant over his head, feeling its weight settle against his chest. The land felt different now, not demanding, not desperate, but welcoming. And for the first time in years, he felt anchored to something bigger than his wounds. Ashki nudged his hand gently. "Yeah," Talan whispered. "We're home." The mountain breathed. The veins sang softly, and the world settled into a peace earned through listening.